Hey gents, today we're going to take a look at two of the most advertised watch brands on the internet, that is MVMT or Movement and Vincero, because I see them compared a lot, but I've never seen a video on those. Before we get into that, I'm going to give you a lot of alternatives that I recommend over these two. First, before we jump in, make sure you subscribe to learn about the best menswear on the internet. Give a thumbs up for awesome watches. And second, if somebody asks me for a watch recommendation, these two never really come up in my head. I say that with a caveat that I think you should absolutely buy what you like. I've said before that Daniel Wellington is the reason that I got into watches. I now own two Omegas, a Luminox, and then 24 other watch brands because it sparked my love for it. And if you love a Movement watch and that's what you want to get, I think you just need to go into it understanding what you're getting, what you're paying for, and why they have this perception around the brand. And same thing with Vincero as well. And so that's what I want to cover first, are a few alternatives you might look into in the watch world that maybe will give you a little bit more bang for your buck. There's definitely better ways to spend a couple $100s on a watch. And if you do want to spend this $150, $200 on a watch, there's some great ones that you can get at lower prices, and these are the ones that I personally like across the board. So I'll put a timestamp down here if you want to just watch the unboxing comparison of these two watches. First, let's talk about some of the alternatives. I do think that there's nothing worse than watch snobbery, so I'm just gonna present these. If you like them, great, go for them. If you don't, check out these two as well. If you're looking for a great watch and not a lot of money, you can look no further than Timex. Here's three awesome models. You can start off with the MK1, which is a field watch, so it's military inspired. It's only $100 or less. You can also look at this Easy Reader. It's $29 for a clean, simple design, and this is gonna be as well made as a lot of these Movement watches anyway. You can look at the Fairfield, under 50 bucks, and then one of my favorites in the entire Timex line right now is the Marlin Vintage Reissue, which is a hand-wound piece, and I found those for $199 over at Zappos. I'll link to those below. Now you can also look into the Seiko realm. Look no further than the SNK 807. Here it is for 63 bucks. There's also the SNZ H57, and then across the entire Seiko line, you can look at the Seiko 5 line. Seiko 5, there's 5 points to the Seiko 5, which stands for, there's a Diaflex, which is an unbreakable mainspring. There's Dia-Shock, which is the shock-resistant design. It's automatic winding. There's a day-date indication, and it's water resistant. So any of the Seiko 5 pieces are going to be incredible entry-level pieces for you. They're going to cost less than a Movement or Vincero, Daniel Wellington, but they're going to have a lot more horological significance. It's just about finding that right aesthetic that you want. Speaking of that aesthetic, Daniel Wellington's design is the reason I looked into it, but if you look a little bit further into the origins of that design, look at the Young Hands Max Bill. Now these ones are definitely more pricey, but if you're looking at Movement because you like the design, but you want better build quality, the origins of this design, and more horological significance, that is the Young Hands brand. You can also look at Yonkers watches, which are similar in the aesthetic to Movement, but they're down in price in that $199 price point and even lower, and there's some beautiful references within there. And all the Yonkers watches are made in Germany, so you're getting incredible craftsmanship as well. Speaking of heritage and build quality, you can also look at the Tissot Every Time. That's a Swiss-made piece with incredible history in the brand, and definitely something that among the watch community is going to give you respect. In line with this Bauhaus clean, simple design, you also have Nordgreen, which is a newer company out of Copenhagen. They have some really clean designs, but they have the designer from Bang & Olufsen, and that's really what got me turned on to them originally. You can also look at my very first watch. It was a quartz watch from Mondaine, which is a Swiss-made company, but it's based on the Swiss Railways design. Daniel Wellington turned me onto that world, but that Mondaine watch really solidified my love of watches originally, and those are extremely reasonably priced as well. And in a similar design aesthetic, you can also look at the Braun watch, and I'll link to that below too. I'm gonna rattle off a couple of more for you, and I'll put all the links below, and then we'll get into this unboxing. So also look at the Hamilton Khaki. That's an incredible piece. You can get those hand wound or automatic, and that's another brand with a lot of historical significance. Citizen, tons of stuff from them. You can look at their Eco Drive. A lot of that stuff is going to be lower than the Movement price points, but you're getting a lot higher build quality. You can look at this company Monteforti, which just launched a Kickstarter. Those watches are beautifully designed. They're also made in Italy. You can look at Victorinox Stoa, which is a brand where you can customize the watches itself, and they're made in Germany. You can look into the Bulova line. Bulova is an American brand. They're known for a lot of innovation, particularly in their course design, but also they were one of the first watches in space. My personal favorite, and this is when you're getting way into the price points, are Nomos. I love Nomos watches. That's probably, it's not really a grail because I have some grails that are out of my price range, but that's one of the watches I could definitely see myself getting in the next couple of years. I'm also really impressed with a chronograph I got from Lux, which is another micro brand doing Swiss-made timepieces at a sub $500 price point. I got a really cool watch from Elliott Havoc that I like, and the difference there is that has like sapphire crystal and some nicer materials, also slightly lower in price point than Movement. And then of course, you can't look at any of these fashion watches and not look at Swatch watches. So those are lower price point pieces that are Swiss made, and so you are getting a lot of that benefit. And then also if you want to check out my history of the Swatch group, where I talk about how Omega, Hamilton, Harry Winston, some of the most luxurious timepieces in the world, are all connected to Swatch as well, I would check that out too. So there you have tons of options for you. Now, if you aren't interested in any of those and you want to look at the two watches, let's unbox these and then we'll talk about the differences between the two so you can make your best decision. I've had Vincero watches in the past, and I did an unboxing of Movement. I didn't end up keeping either of them because I'm now reminded how unimpressed I am with some of the watches. I was unimpressed with the Vincero Automatic because it wasn't keeping good time and it was a little bit thicker than I like. Now this watch is a similar thickness as the Automatic, but it is a quartz movement. They do this thing with putting marble on the back of it, which is a cool little nice touch, and they've got Vini Vidi Vici written on the back. The strap, I was trying to get exact comparisons so I could do a Movement with a metal strap to compare the quality of the Vincero with a metal strap on here, but I couldn't get exact models. I think the bottom line here is that these are both extremely similar. They likely come from similar factories in China. The Vincero feels more substantial of a watch than the Movement does. Also, the fact that this is almost a real chronograph versus this is a dual time. You're just getting the pushers on the sides on both of them. I mistook this for a chronograph itself. The Movement watch is not particularly legible for how thin the hands are, and it's a dark hands on a black background. The Vincero at least has some lume on there. The lume is very weak, as you'd expect for a watch that is sub $200 and not made by Citizen or Seiko. I do like the matte black finish on the Vincero versus the Movement, which has more of this like brushed black finish to it. The action on these is okay. The Vincero's is definitely better than the Movement's. The Movement's feels very hollow and flimsy as you're moving the crown and trying to adjust the time. So I think if you're a person that wants to get more into watches and things, it's not going to really grab you. Like when I first started to use luxury watches, that's when you really feel the craftsmanship and work that goes into them, and that makes you kind of fall further into that hole. So maybe that's a side benefit of the Movement, is that it would not necessarily dip you into that world. And I'm using the pushers on the Movement, but I can't get it to adjust the time properly, so I'm not even sure that they work, but I don't think they're designed to work. And I think when you boil a lot of people's arguments down, and if you watch my watch video from last year where I talk about why watch guys hate these brands, is that they're using designs from pieces of significance like a Paul Newman Daytona to look like an expensive watch. But then, Movement puts subdials on their watches that have no actual function. So you have pushers and movements, but the subdials don't measure anything, but they're meant to measure things. So they're like hollow shells of the products that they're trying to be, while also, and this is the perfect example with the Timex Weekender, if somebody wants to buy a watch though that they can have something to wear on their wrist, because we all have phones now, that's great, and you should do that, but you can do that for less than $100. But these brands are charging more than that, And so, you know, it's goofy. But after spending some time with both of these watches, if you're looking to go between Vincero and Movement, particularly with these two watches that I'm holding here, Vincero is better made, and I would pick this over the Movement any day. Regardless of the strap, you know, I can swap these straps out and anything else. The physical build quality of the Vincero feels more substantial than the Movement. If you're interested in watches and you want to go more into that world, there's incredible channels. I've covered some stuff on mine before, but you can look at the Urban Gentry, you can look at Federico, you can look at Theo and Harris, you can look at Watchfinder, you can look at, there's so many great channels out there to really dive into the nitty gritty of why this stuff really matters, and that's what I end up watching as well. And so I just wanted to put my perspective on these two and give you some options to look at if you're interested in this world. There you have it, gents. I'll have links to everything below so you can check out these two watches. You can check out all the ones that I mentioned in my quick rundown. I also forgot to mention Teddy Baldessar has been doing some great stuff in the watch world, so check out his channel. I've done a couple of things with him as well, and he's just doing some really great stuff on like entry-level pieces or starting to your watch collection, so I'd check that out as well. And if you have any questions about Vincero versus Movement, I got them both right here. Let me know down in the comments. You can also reach out at _Cavalier on Twitter and Instagram. Until next time, gents, this is the Cavalier.